Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second Anti-contractor Home podcast. My name is Chance.
And I'm Belinda.
And today we're going to talk about sewage. All right. So this podcast is about outdoor sewage systems, which is where all the crap goes in your house and how it ties into the city.
Yeah.
And if you don't live in the city, or if your jurisdiction, if your land is too far off the grid, let's say, how you deal with that waste in a low maintenance fashion, in an anti-contractor home fashion.
Half the websites say that Texas and Florida have the most strict off-grid laws, like they don't want to promote it. But then other websites I see say that Texas really promotes it.
In Texas, I would think there's a lot of people
Yes.
that live off-grid because Texas is so big
large,
and
yeah.
so rural
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of people need to do that.
Especially when it comes to sewage treatment.
We have
Probably not
siblings that live close to big cities, and they still have things like septic systems.
That's in McKinney, right?
Yes, Frisco.
Frisco.
Yeah. So off the grid.
So off the grid. The idea of off the grid was, I first came across it in undergrad, and I believe my 5th year independent study project I actually designed a house that was off the grid. It was all theoretical and
So off the grid in the desert?
in the desert, yes, in Dubai, off the grid. Yeah. So off the grid living is a system and lifestyle designed to help people live in a self-sufficient manner without reliance on one or more public utilities, water, power, or sewer. So
you don't have to be off. You can pick one of those things and still, I guess you're still considered, I'm partially off the grid.
Yeah. So when you're living off the grid, you might have solar power that powers your home, wells, cisterns, or springs to provide your water, and septic systems or composting systems to deal with your sewage and waste.
Absolutely. And just do a quick search on YouTube and you'll find hundreds of videos of people living off the grid, or building their homes and living off the grid.
Yeah.
It's all pretty extreme, and I don't think that's what we're in the market for.
Yeah.
This is not going to be the next off the grid home build YouTube channel, but
yeah. I wasn't sure if I was going to talk about this, but since you went to the extreme section, I was fascinated. There's this place in Arlington, and they call it Garden of Eden Community. And it's this hippie commune. You've heard of it?
No, but I can imagine something like that exists.
And they completely cut off, completely. They don't rely on the city for anything. And it's this like 4-acre plot of land. And all these families live there. They grow their own crops, and it's crazy.
We saw something similar in Grand Designs, the TV show.
Yeah.
Where they have to live in a certain part of the UK, England. I'm not sure if it was strictly in England. They have this area where you have to prove that you're fully self-sufficient with food, with water, electricity, and everything, and then you're allowed to live.
Like they measure you by certain standards and say, okay, now it's acceptable. Yeah.
We're not that extreme.
No, we're not that extreme. I mean, although it's not a bad thing. It's pushing you to be self-reliant, different way of living.
But we like the connection to the city. So I had a question. You were talking about how cities have, or the state has restrictions on your off-the-grid living. And I wonder why they do that. Why are they keeping you? I guess they want you to still be tied to the grid. Was it? I believe I read one article last week. El Paso. They said they're going to start charging people who have solar panels and who sell electricity back to the grid, who produce so much electricity that they consume everything. They produce everything they need and they sell electricity back. They're going to start charging them just because they're losing money. Who's going to start charging them?
The El Paso Energy something.
Oh, the electrical company?
Mm-hmm.
The utility company?
Yeah. Yep, I was right. El Paso Electric. They penalize customers who have solar panels and sell electricity back to the grid.
Okay, so they're customers of this electric company already, and they also have solar panels.
Yeah.
So, I wonder, is that the Encore equivalent of what we have here?
Possibly, yeah. I guess they're still tied to the company just in case they don't produce enough electricity.
Yes, it's similar to what we were proposed. Put panels on our roof. They'll pay for them and everything. Our rate will be fixed monthly rate for 30 years or however long. And if it produces enough it pays for all of our electricity. If we need extra, we get it from Encore, and so we get the Encore charges through that. Or if it produces more electricity than we use, then we get to, in this particular one, it was putting it into a basket for us to use in the more, the hotter months, the warmer months where we would use more electricity.
Yeah.
I feel like electricity would be the easiest way to go off the grid.
Yeah. That's why more and more people are probably turning to that.
Yeah.
Especially with solar panels becoming so cheap nowadays. It just prices just keep dropping.
Yes, yeah, and I would imagine there will be a day fairly soon where they are significantly cheaper and the most cost-effective method for providing your electricity in general.
Yeah.
That's a more sustainable world. That's what we hope to get to, right?
Yep. Before we go into the sewage systems and all that, I wanted to talk about this one thing I found out. It's called 811, or call before you dig law. It's this law in Texas where before you start any excavations on your site, like you might have a site plan with utilities running through and all that, but to make sure you don't hit any lines that affects the entire community, call 811, and it's a free service they provide. So they get in touch with all the companies that provide services in the area that they know they might have lines running through there, and they come over there and put flags in the ground telling you like this is where the electric is, this is where a water line is, and all that stuff, and they like flag your plot of land before you start digging for free.
Isn't that what you pay the civil company to come out and do, to tell you where your civil tie-ins are? I thought. That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
Get them to come out and locate your utilities. That'd be great. So,
anyway,
assuming you have utilities on your site or you're building in the city, there's usually going to be some sort of potable water line and a sanitary waste line from the city going to your plot of land or just off your plot of land.
Yeah.
And so typically those run, I know in the commercial world, as plumbers are responsible for 5 feet outside of the building where they need to go to tie into the city. So similar circumstance with home building, you're going to have a city tie-in of domestic water and sanitary waste.
And usually it's done at the same time.
Yes, yeah.
So I was trying to find an approximate cost for it, and it says that, I don't know, it can be either $500 to $2,000 just to hook it up to your city sewer. And usually that's the same, it's the one price for both tying it into your city water and the city sewage system. But I read this other thing. It's called a house connection sewer, HCS. It's a private sewer between the residential building and the public collection sewer. So even though you might have like a 4-inch pipe coming from your house to the main city sewer, there's a small, it's almost running parallel, like down this road, there might be a big 8-inch pipe or larger sewage pipe. There might be a parallel pipe running to it. It's a house connection sewer pipe, and it's an 8-inch pipe. So that is the private sewer. You still have to pay for that portion of it. You have to pay for that 8-inch pipe portion of it.
So you're saying that the city takes their line down basically a main road, and then you have a smaller line, like an 8-inch line, coming off that main road to branch down the smaller roads, and then from that branch, that private line, you'd have your 4-inch lines coming to the houses.
Yes.
Okay.
So you have to pay for that 4-inch line plus that 8-inch line.
Okay.
Because that's private. That's not a public.
Okay. And does, as far as you know, like how far you have to go to get to that main city tie-in, does that affect your cost, or is it just sort of a flat rate?
It depends on the run.
So it does, the length of pipe?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and you're responsible for all of it.
Okay. So I would hire a plumber to come out and tie into the city connection. And
I wonder if that final connection has to be made by the city.
I'm sure
they have to verify it, supervised
or inspected by the city.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you would hire your plumber to come out and to tie into the city line, and that plumber would bring that line. Typically, in a normal home construction, that would be done early, and the wherever your bathrooms are located, your kitchen is located, the plumber would dig trenches and run PVC pipe underground and stub up wherever you're going to have waste within your house.
Yeah, that's done first.
Yes.
Yeah. You think the connection has to be done early, or it can just be
connection to
done?
The city?
Yeah.
I don't think so. No. I think you can.
They just dig the trench to that
Yes,
point.
I think you can, because you're not actually
using
the
it.
system's not being not functioning. Yeah.
I read that you're supposed to use a 4-inch pipe in your house, and it has to be buried below the frost line.
Yes.
Is there's still a frost line even in Texas?
In Texas, yes, the frost line is very shallow.
Very shallow.
It's 12, 18 inches maybe.
And I also read that there are two different pipes you can use: ABS and PVC.
Yes.
So ABS is the one that's affected by UV light. That should not be overground, because that can disintegrate. But PVC doesn't disintegrate.
In commercial construction, typically you do not use PVC above ground. Whenever you go above ground, for example, your sanitary waste lines that go from your first floor to the second floor, or your vent lines that go up and out, those are typically run with cast iron above ground.
Oh, really?
Yes, and that's by code.
Oh.
But in residential plumbing, I believe you're allowed to run ABS or PVC through the walls up through the roof. Now, I believe whenever we investigated our washer hookup, we found in the code that in the city of Dallas, you have to use PVC. You cannot use ABS.
Sometimes local regulations require ABS pipes to contain pigments to protect it from UV radiation, or painted latex paint.
So ABS is the cheap man's PVC.
Really?
That's what it sounds like.
They're both low cost.
Right, yes. But if you go to Home Depot, you'll see
the gray
ABS,
one is
the black.
Okay.
If you compare the price of a 10-foot piece of PVC versus ABS, I believe ABS is going to be cheaper.
So ABS pipes are easier to install than PVC pipes.
Why is that?
PVC pipes need a purple primer, which is what we've used.
Okay, ABS doesn't need the primer.
No.
Okay. Yeah, so if you look at the plumbing for our pool, it's above ground. They used PVC. And you can see the primer, you can see the adhesive.
Yeah. So ABS is used in drain, waste, vent pipe systems and sewer systems. Also used as electrical insulation. Interesting. PVC is also used to produce pipes for drain, waste and vent.
In the industry, we call that DWV.
DWV?
DWV, drain, waste, vent.
Oh, really?
DWV, yeah.
Oh. Acronyms for everything. ABS piping has higher impact strength than PVC, especially at low temperatures. Yes. ABS can deform under sun exposure. So that's the one. Yeah. So ABS is not good with UV light.
So fork up a little bit extra money and use the PVC.
Or use cast iron. Like we have in this house.
Extra money.
Yeah.
That is not typically done.
But this house does have it.
Yes, this house has copper drains and...
it does have cast iron too when we opened up the bathroom wall.
Yes, it has copper drains, but cast iron vents. Yes, which is insane. That's that big, thick pipe.
Yeah. Why does the vent need to be cast iron and not copper?
There's no water running inside the vent line. It's just air running through the vent line.
So?
It would be more expensive to run copper.
Oh, okay. That's why.
So copper is more expensive than cast iron.
Than cast iron?
Because you have to have a minimum 2 to 3 inch vent. We probably have 2-inch vents coming off of our water closets and then tying in together to a 3 to 4 inch, probably a 3-inch vent in residential going through the roof. Yeah.
Okay.
So those are some of the basic materials used in
that was interesting.
Residential plumbing. But that's not what this podcast is about in particular. We want to keep it specific to the city tie-in to the sewer, what goes on underground and before you get to that stub up.
Yeah.
So as we were saying, the typical residential house has those stub ups wherever your waste lines are.
Mm-hmm.
And that has to be something you have to consider beforehand. And that becomes an issue in our mind as
it's too restrictive.
Anti-contractor home perspective. That could be an issue because you're going to have slab. You'd have to crack up the slab to get underneath to where your pipe is, or you have to dig a big trench.
Yeah.
Either way to access your pipe.
And it doesn't have any flexibility in that. Especially if it's a slab on grade and you're trying to, if you're trying to expand your bathroom or something and change the drain location.
Yes.
You can't do that.
You can't just keep adding bathrooms. Eventually your drain will be undersized.
Yeah. It's not easy to just change that out.
So you could prepare beforehand and oversize your drains going with the intention of adding on in the future.
Do houses ever have two drain lines going to the city? Or it's always just like one?
It's always going to be one
4-inch pipe?
They're always going to, like, even if your house has a bathroom on one side and then on the other side, those two lines will eventually tie in together to that one city connection because that would be more expensive.
Yeah. So if we want tying to city connection, what are our options?
Septic system.
Yes,
or composting or an outhouse. But the secondary method, which is very commonly used in homes that are maybe not all the way off the grid, but close to the city, but the city doesn't have a tie-in point, or the homes were built before the city's waste system was close, so they had a septic system in place beforehand.
Yeah. So the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, they have a really good layout of all septic systems. Like, it's very understandable. They show like what a basic septic tank is, how it functions, like a cross section through it.
Let's discuss the basic components of a septic
tank
system. So it's typically a 4-inch line running out of your house into a massive concrete or plastic
or fiberglass. That's the new thing.
Or fiberglass tank. This tank is 15,000 gallons, roughly, just depending on how big your house is, how many people are in your house. It consists of a tank, a drain line that goes to your tank, and then from that tank, your waste goes through the inlet, and then it is separated out where you have your sludge in the bottom and your effluent goes up to the top. And that effluent is what gets filtered out and goes through the outlet of this large tank. And that goes then into a distribution box where it is distributed. Typically, this is one method of using a septic system. It's distributed to an absorption field where there's roughly 4 lateral lines, which are long lines of PVCs that are
perforated.
Yeah, perforated or punctured to where the effluent will disperse throughout the absorption field. And
it's cleaned naturally before it reaches your groundwater supply through the dirt and the soil and the rocks and everything that's out there in the field.
Yes.
So it's a natural method of filtration.
Yes.
Water filtration.
Yes. But eventually that sludge that it's at the bottom of your tank, it does build up enough to where the effluent level rises very quickly and will back up your system. So you do have to have access to that septic tank to where you can have a company come in and pump out the sludge out of your system, and then you're ready to go, brand new.
Mm-hmm. How often do people have to do that, clean out? Like your parents, how often do they have to clean out their septic tank?
That's a good question. I'm not sure how often they've had it cleaned out.
I saw something about every 10 years, but I don't know if that's
it's very, very
rare.
Infrequently.
And it depends on the size of the tank, how many people are using in the house using that. And
it's not something that's going to be happening once a year, once every 6 months or something like that. It's going to be much.
But if you're talking about an anti-contractor home thing, it's not something you can do yourself, pumping all that out, because you still have to dispose of all that sludge. It has to be safely.
Yes,
you can't do it on your own.
I'm sure it's going to be worth your money to not get your hands dirty in that and have someone come out.
Yeah, but I'm saying it's probably you're not allowed to as well, because you can't just dump it somewhere.
True. You have to have it.
Contaminants.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have to have it sent to a landfill.
Dump it over there.
But that's the basics of a septic system. Now there's a couple of different types of septic systems. People like to get creative and do things like have an above ground septic system, which the tank itself is still buried because this septic system is gravity fed. So you're just like
the slope is really important.
Your drain system in your house, it's all gravity. That's why when the electricity goes out,
you can still
use the bathroom. greatest invention ever. So it's all gravity fed. So your tank would still be underground in an above ground system, but
that's confusing.
right. But the effluent that is dispersing through the outlet could be pumped, and from there it could go into an above ground
planter boxes or something like that. So, would you like to talk about Benjamin Uyeda's planter boxes in this instance?
I don't know how to say his name.
I think that's how it's pronounced. I'm not sure.
Yes,
Homemade Modern guy.
He has Mr. Homemade Modern.
He's people have probably watched that. He's designed a container home in Joshua Tree, right? Yes. So they were probably not. They didn't have a septic system anywhere close by. He had to deal with his own sewage and wastewater there.
In his particular circumstance, which we'll link the video for that. It's very interesting watch because he goes through all the details of how much everything cost, and in order to get a septic system, you have to see if your site is able to handle that
percolation test.
Yes. So you have to have a percolation test done. Well, he had this test done, and since he's in California, in his particular location, the soil was not appropriate for an underground absorption field. Basically,
the soil didn't absorb water fast enough. It would back up too quickly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he had to get creative, and he came up with this idea of having these above ground massive concrete planters where the effluent would be pumped out of the tank, the septic tank, and into these planters. Mm-hmm. So I would argue that Benjamin Uyeda's above ground septic system is more anti-contractor home friendly than a typical underground absorption field.
Yeah.
Yes, because you would have to know where that absorption field is, and you would have to dig in order to maintain it. Mm-hmm. With this above ground system, where the effluent is being pumped out into these above ground planters, your pump could fail, but you would
know. You would see it's visible.
You would need to replace your pump. You also have to have electricity running to your pump.
Yeah, that's true.
So there's a couple of extra steps. It's going to be a little bit more money.
So what happens in his case when he had those planter boxes? What happens when the water filters through those planter boxes and it's at the bottom and it's clean, filtered water? What does he do with that?
At the bottom of the planters?
Yeah.
He's just using
It's just absorbed by the soil and that's it?
Yeah,
the plants use them.
Are absorbing that, yes.
Okay.
Yes, I don't think he's doing anything else with that.
It doesn't run off from there. They might have. I think he had an overflow drain. He
has an overflow, yes, to where if it does overflow, it will drain back via gravity into the septic tank. Itself.
Yeah,
and then be pumped back again. But I think that's a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
Whenever your soil doesn't allow for it, but that's one thing you need to have done whenever you have a septic system is you have to have that percolation test.
$1,500 or something. That's what it costs.
I'm sure it depends on
where you're living,
your jurisdiction.
So, is there another septic system other than an above ground, or even
there's two types of systems. There's an anaerobic and an aerobic. Yes, septic system. You can have an aerobic
underground
septic system that's underground as well. You're just introducing oxygen at some point.
Okay.
At some location. It oxidizes the sludge, the
I think it's more the microbes use oxygen to break that down.
Yes, they use oxygen and they break down that sludge.
Yeah. So that's more expensive than using an anaerobic system.
Yeah, the simplest, most boring method there is the gravity-fed underground anaerobic system with an underground absorption field.
That's what your parents have probably.
Yes.
So the total cost, the average cost, I know it's hard to approximate something like this, but what we've seen is it can cost between $1,500 to $4,000, which is a big...
Yes, yeah, and you can, just depending on how big of a tank you need, your tank can cost $1,500.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So your two types of tanks, your plastic or your fiberglass tank versus your concrete tank. The concrete tank is going to be more durable.
Yes.
It's going to be longer lasting. It's going to be low maintenance. But up front, it's going to be more expensive. The tank itself is going to be more expensive to purchase. It's much heavier. You're going to have to hire...
A lot heavier,
big piece of machinery, lift it and set it in.
And also I read that whenever you're doing, in Dallas especially, whenever you're installing a septic tank, anything to do with it, if you're hiring someone, they have to be a licensed contractor.
Right.
So if you're hiring someone to dig a trench, it has to be a licensed contractor.
Right. Unless
installing
you do it yourself.
Yes, unless you do it yourself. That'd be a big hole to dig.
Yes, and that would require machinery that is not very anti-contractor friendly. But we'll get to that in a bit.
Yeah.
So these concrete tanks, they're heavier, so you have to have a crane or something come lift and put it in. And also, if they do break or something like that, they're very disruptive to have to repair.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to have to
dig up everything.
A lot of digging. Yeah, you're going to have to bring that crane.
Your sister, brother had to replace their septic tank when they went Tyler.
I believe theirs was plastic, though. And I think my other sister's is plastic as well.
Really?
Yes, I think. I'm not certain, but concrete seems like a much more expensive, much less commonly used tank. But the plastic does have some advantages. It's lightweight, so it's easier.
More cost effective.
Yes, it's a little bit cheaper. Now, fiberglass, I don't know how much more expensive that would be than just a regular cheaper plastic. So,
I would think that would be more durable than plastic. Fiberglass.
Yes, but not as durable as concrete still.
No. People actually, you have steel septic tanks? It seems like a bad idea. But I just saw this. It says it's the least durable and least popular option. It can last you to 20 to 25 years at most. Why would you even have
I feel like
that?
That would corrode.
Yeah.
So these plastic tanks on that subject are immune to corrosion. So that's a positive.
Yeah.
The negative is that these things are very breakable. They can crack.
Disintegrate.
Yeah. They can be crushed. You have to be careful of what goes over that, what goes over the tank after it's buried.
If you have something rolling over it while...
Yeah, heavy piece of machinery or bringing some equipment in or something. So for those reasons, the lifespan is typically a little shorter for a plastic tank. But a plastic tank is more DIY friendly because you could maneuver it yourself. You don't have to hire that.
Do people try to completely hide it and make it seem like it doesn't even exist on the property? These septic tanks?
They're buried.
But they have these two access points. Ideally you'd have that to make it easier to clean out. So what do they do with that?
Yes. So those are typically, you want those to be easy to find.
Yeah.
Because you want to know that you have a septic system, which... you
don't want to be just driving over that spot.
Right. Yeah. And typically, based on code, you're going to have someone come out and design your system to where it's going to be away from clearances or drop-offs or anything like that. So it's going to be put in the right location. And if you get a permit for your septic system, you'll be required to have it inspected and it be put in a particular place where it will work. So your access points do need to be visible.
Above ground, yeah.
Yes, they need to be enough above ground to where you can hire the company to come in and
clean that out.
Pump out the sludge.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's not something that people are going to want to hide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the fact that you put it underground means you're trying to hide it. That's the good thing about the planters, what Benjamin Uyeda is celebrating it. It's I have the septic system. This is part of the septic system, and it's aesthetically pleasing having those things over there.
I love the idea of celebrating it.
Yeah.
But you do have to remember that your system, unless your system in your house is a pumped waste system, it's going to be gravity fed.
Yes,
and
it has
your
to.
house is typically
not
at ground level.
10 feet in the air.
You're not going to be able to have your tank above ground because those tanks are 8 feet deep or so, and that inlet is towards the top.
Yeah,
so that
you're
all
right.
the sludge and water can go down to the bottom.
Yeah, that's true. So now related to what we're talking about, I'd like to talk about gray water versus black water separation.
Okay.
So gray water is water that's not contaminated with human waste. Right. So it's water from washing dishes, your laundry, your sinks in your bathrooms, not the toilets. So the black water would be the toilets.
Pun intended, but I think the showers and the lavatories are a gray area.
Oh, chance.
But yes, I think you can justify that your lavatory is gray water.
Yeah.
The only
bathtubs also classify as gray water, actually. Yeah.
Yes. So the thing, and that's one thing about your septic system, that you could design your load, however big you need your tank to be, could be designed around this idea of a gray water reuse system. Yeah, separating.
So if you do that, your tank doesn't have to be as large because you're dealing with the gray water separately, and only the black water goes into your tank.
Right, which is the black water is what is going in the tank. We didn't mention that earlier, but
not always, but because most homes just lump it all together and there's one pipe going to your septic system.
Right. I'm saying the contents that go into that septic tank are black water for sure. And whenever they mix together, when you mix in the gray water and black water, it's all black water.
Yes. Yeah. So Arizona, they have made it mandatory to separate your gray water and your black water systems.
In general?
In homes, but people weren't doing it because it costs an extra $1,000 or so bucks when you're building a new house to separate gray water from black water. So what they do now is they offer you a $1,000 rebate if you separate the two when you're building a new house.
So it's free, basically.
Yes, because they want people to. Yeah. It's a way of like recycling your water,
absolutely,
reducing your consumption.
And in Arizona, where it's so hot and and dry, I mean, it's a desert. They need that all the water they can get, so they could take that gray water and reuse it. Yeah.
And so they were saying like the issues that California, Nevada, and Arizona are facing now with the scarcity of water, it's only a matter of time. They estimate about 20 years before Texas faces the same issue, and they have to resort to such incentives like encouraging people to reuse gray water and only discard
Texas
of black.
has really big aquifers.
Yeah, I know, but you can't take it for granted.
Yes,
in a matter of time.
Yeah.
So
everything will dry up eventually.
So the idea with that is like in Texas too, if you want to, they allow you to reuse your gray water, but you have to make sure that the maximum usage rate is no more than 400 gallons a day.
So you can't reuse more than 400 gallons in a day?
You have to make sure that the tank holding your gray water doesn't receive more than 400 gallons a day. And also, which we looked into this when we were thinking of recycling our laundry water. This gray water tank has to be connected to your septic system.
Yes.
In Texas.
Redundancy.
Yeah, yes. Backup, like overflow or something, it has to be connected.
Yes.
But they do allow you to reuse gray water if you have all those systems in place. Yeah.
Because they don't want people saying, "Oh, I'm going to separate my gray water," and then having these massive tanks and then nowhere for it to go and just start pouring their water everywhere, emptying their tanks wherever, and not using their water properly.
It's also related to rainwater harvesting because it could tie into your gray water reuse system that you have in your house. In Texas, rainwater harvesting equipment is free of sales tax. They're actually incentivizing this. They want people to do it.
Like they used to do solar panels?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Rainwater harvesting and gray water reuse is
very important.
Very sustainable practices.
I mean, just think about this first year in this house, and we've been really cognizant of how much water is using because we have a yard. We didn't have it the last 4 years when we were living in an apartment. So every time we wash clothes now, we have to dump all that water that we've used and then use more water to water the yard. I'm not talking about the pool because you don't want to use gray water in your pool, but just to water the yard and the plants and all that. It seems so wasteful.
It's amazing how much water those washers use.
Yeah,
ours is, it may not be the most efficient washer, but I mean, upwards of 40 gallons for one load is
because we actually tried to harvest it once.
Pretty insane.
Yeah. And people do so many loads in a week.
So if you did, could your kitchen sink be considered gray water?
Yes.
Even though there's food and stuff.
Good question.
Going down that drain.
Well, that's disposal. That's still going down the drain. Yeah, that's iffy.
That's a gray area.
No
So
more
that would
plants.
be
I'd definitely like to think about that when designing the system, the separation of gray and black
absolutely.
water.
So if we
It's-
were to have to do in our anti-contractor home, if we did have a septic system, we could perhaps have a smaller size septic system, have it pumped out less because of the way we're reusing our gray water.
Yeah. hmm What if we can't do the septic system? So everything we've talked about, it seems like a good option because it's a self-sustaining way of dealing with your waste, but it's not really DIY friendly. It's expensive to install. It's difficult to maintain. What if we do have to tie into a city?
Are you saying that we don't
Like we
want
weigh
to
the
do
pros
a
and cons.
septic system?
Yeah.
Now here's a question. If you have a city tie-in, can you do a septic system?
Yes.
You can just choose to?
You can have a septic system that's also tied to the city.
Does it have to be tied into the city?
It does not have to be tied to the city, but it can be tied to the city.
Okay. So, for example, in our plot of land, which is not big enough, obviously, in our current house, we could disconnect from the city and have a septic system and not have any connection to the city. Well, we'd have our water
After
would still be connected.
we have to apply for a permit and
Yes.
all that stuff, but
But I was just curious if you could install a septic system or if you're required to tie into the city because they don't want all that extra underground.
no, you're not. You can choose to. So what I've read is that if people have a septic system, they're just sick of it because it malfunctions or it breaks down and they're just tired of having to pump it out and all that stuff. They can just either close it off and then redirect it to the city or tie it directly from, like, your outlet goes directly to your
And I would
city.
assume as cities grow and expand, those
People will be
city
more
lines
inclined to do that.
continue to go
Yeah.
further and further out. And so you would have that option. Oh, you
Yeah.
can connect to the city now. But if you have a perfectly functioning septic system, you'd have no need for that extra cost
Yeah.
because you would have to dig it up, disconnect, and reconnect. Or if it's not working like you had hoped, if you're sick of pumping it out, you could go down that route.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
That's it.
So, for an anti-contractor home, we would first need to have we need to call 811, right?
811. Call before you dig.
See where our connections are. Now, will they tell us if there's a city sewer line in
I
the
think
area?
they just tell you what utilities are on your site. I don't think they go into where your city connection is and all that sort of stuff. You have to hire someone to do that.
Okay. So you buy your plot of land and you hire someone to come out and locate your utilities. And from there you decide, okay, if my plot of land is large enough, I could do a septic system or I could tie into the city.
Yeah.
And then from there, depending on your site, if you chose to do a septic system, you'd need to have a percolation test done to see if your soil can disperse the effluent.
So are we still going to think of that as the first option? Having a septic system?
It all depends on your site.
Yeah.
I mean, if
And it could be, if you are buying a plot of land near a lake or something, or in an HOA area, they may not allow septic systems. It all depends on the plot of land.
it all depends on your site.
Because of runoff into the water and contamination and all that, they probably won't allow.
Right. Just
A septic
depends on
system
where it is.
there.
Yeah. It all depends on the site.
Yeah.
But either way, whether it be through the city connection or through this septic tank, our goal is to stub out this 4-inch line and we take it from there
Yeah.
and design our own plumbing system.
And also be mindful of the environment while designing this with recycling, reducing the black water use and all that.
Absolutely. If you had both options on your site, you could tie into the city just as easily as you could do a septic system. I think that tying into the city would be a smarter thing to do.
I agree.
Less to maintain.
Yeah.
But if you want to reuse your gray water,
You don't have to tie that into the city. Only your black water line can tie to the city. You could have a separate line for gray water reuse.
Yeah. So how would that work? I'm trying to envision, because would you just have, you
have 2 waste
you have
lines.
2 bathrooms, you have your 2 drain lines coming down, tying in together, going into the city.
Yes.
Everything else is tying into a different location. But doesn't that also have to tie into the city?
Like an overflow probably.
Yeah.
So that ties into a grey water containment system, which eventually like has an overflow drain tying to your.
Okay, so the city has both a black water and a grey water connection.
No, it has one connection. I'm saying your overflow of the grey water system will tie into your black water line.
Okay. So your grey water is going. So does your grey water system need to be pumped to get into that tank, pumped to the tank? Or is your tank buried?
If it's buried, then no.
I guess, yeah your tank's buried. But then from there, it would need to be pumped out to use it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we had this idea of not having any of these drain lines under the slab, like coming in through a wall, like a really large chase spacer. Could we still do that with the slope required if everything's gravity fed?
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Everything would need to be elevated a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, like your bathtub, your sinks, your water closets or toilets
could be a slightly higher height than the rest of the house.
Yeah, because you have to slope it 1/8 inch per foot.
Yeah.
Down to get into the drain.
No, connection to city sewer, standard minimum slope for laterals is 2%.
So once you get to a certain point, maybe you have to hit that 1/4 inch per foot slope, but the standard is 1%.
Okay.
For all commercial systems that I've designed, it's 1/8 inch per foot. Now, a thought just came to my head. What if you had that waste line coming in from the city, stubbed up into your house, but in like its own little basement, like an elevator sump or something?
Yeah.
Where it's.
But that is below your house, just that one spot.
Yes. So everything dumps into there.
That. Mm-hmm.
But our hope is to have access to our drain lines and our water lines so that we can fix anything that were to break. We can maintain it ourselves. Yeah.
So this was very informative. I did not really know much about septic systems before this. I'm not sold on it. It seems expensive. It could work in certain scenarios, but not in all.
I was actually surprised with how inexpensive it is. Like on like $1,500, I know that seems extreme. I doubt you could get a system done for $1,500, but $4,000 to me, pricing that out in the grand scheme of your whole house, how much that's going to cost, $4,000 does not seem like that much money.
Yeah.
Those are
sustainable living,
the two main options that we have to consider whenever we're looking at our anti-contractor home. And I think that we've agreed upon that separating our black and our gray water would be the method we'd like to go.
Yeah.
And both of these lines would need to be accessible to some extent so that we could maintain them. So what are we going to talk about next week?
Outdoor electrical. Since we're still doing utilities,
utilities coming to the house, outdoor electrical.
Yeah.
All right.
Would that include the solar panel connection? Because that's basically outdoor.
Yeah, that's a lot to discuss.
So let's say water is a simple connection to the city. Mm-hmm. So let's do the outdoor electrical.
Yeah, so let's investigate what it takes to get electrical to your site. Mm-hmm. That wraps up episode 2 of the Anti-Contractor Home Podcast.
Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, bye for now.
Bye for now.